When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comics YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be talking Tommen and Myrcella in the 25 Days of Winds of Winter event. Now, Tommen and Myrcella, there's not a lot to go off of in terms of, we just know basic where they are, right? Tommen is currently the king. Now, a lot has happened underneath him. We know, for one, Marjorie Tyrell has been proved innocent because Mace Tyrell is seen marching on Storm's End in the Winds of Winter sample chapters. We know that Cersei is not going to Casterly Rock now because of Kevin Lannister and also Pycelle's deaths by Varys. So Tommen is in a weird spot, right? He doesn't have a true person above him. And something that I think is even more questionable is why Mace Tyrell didn't try to assert himself as the kind of king regent while Tommen is growing up, because he definitely could have, right? Cersei does not have the Lannister army here. She also doesn't have the public behind her. It's very interesting that that doesn't occur. It'll be interesting to see how George kind of explores that with Cersei in the opening of A Winds of Winter. So Tommen's in a weird spot because, yes, he's still close to his mother, but that's probably a bad thing, not necessarily a good thing. And on the flip side, you have Marcella. Now, Marcella's plot has gone quite badly, right? She's lost an ear. She's being manipulated by the Dornish. And Cersei had this whole concocted plan to try and kill Trystane and all this stuff. And that's not going to go well because, well, for one, Doran Martell knows the plot. And two, he ends up sending the Sand Snakes back to King's Landing. Now, we do see that Nymeria is being given the seat of Doran/Oberyn's on the Small Council. And I am someone that thinks the Sand Snakes will have a very large role in terms of the King's Landing plot. We know that Tyene is also being sent here to kind of get cozy with this High Sparrow. And I think when you think about the positions that both Nymeria and Tyene will be in, they'll be in positions very close to the royal family. Now, we know Cersei's not going to trust them. She doesn't like the Dornish. She's already been plotting against them. I think it's very likely that when young Griff starts to get closer to the city, we could see something like we saw with the original sack of King's Landing. In the original sack of King's Landing, both of Elya's children were killed. This could be almost a parallel or a revenge version, as Aegon, the kid that was allegedly killed in this sack, is being brought back to the city and destroying the family that did it to him, the Lannisters, and I guess the Baratheons, because in name, Tommen and Myrcella are Baratheons, but in reality, they're just Lannisters. So I think that's what, will be part of that opening part of it. Now, what do I think their deaths will be like? Now, the show went this route of having Tommen kill himself. Now, if Tommen was a bit older in the books, I think you could point to some sort of death like that happening. But the fact of the matter is that I just don't think Tommen's at an old enough age to process those emotions in a way that would lead him to ending his own life. Now, what I could see, which I think is a bit more interesting, if you think about the way that Cersei might have killed her own child during the Battle of the Blackwater, would she possibly consider, killing her own son in Tommen because of young Griff's impending, taking over of the city? Now, I don't know how likely that is, given the fact that I think Cersei could easily try to escape before young Griff even gets there based upon the populace turning against her. Or is it going to be some sort of situation like, Sansa escaping during the Purple Wedding, where it's her escaping as young Griff and the Golden Company are taking over the city? That could be very likely as well. But I think that could be one outcome for the character of Tommen. I think Marcella herself, as she will probably get to King's Landing somewhat early in the book, I would expect before young Griff starts his march on King's Landing that she'll at least be close to King's Landing. I think her fate is going to be at the hands of the Sand Snakes. I think this has been hinted at way too many times, the possibility of killing Marcella. It makes the most amount of sense if Arianne is going to link the Dornish to young Griff. Marcella really doesn't have much value to them outside of maybe putting her as like a puppet ruler over the Lannister lands, but I think the Sand Snakes will kill her. That's just been alluded to too many times in A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, and that's going to make a lot of sense. Now, the other part of Marcella's, coming back to King's Landing, there's going to be a lot of suspicion here, right? Cersei's going to be, grilling, I would say Nymeria specifically. How did she lose her ear? oh, this Darkstar character, that's a little bit suspicious. So I do think that there's going to be basically Cersei drowned in enemies, right? She's going to have the Dornish. She's not even really going to know Tyene is even here, but she's going to know Nymeria is here with about, I think it's said in the book, about 100 either soldiers or just people in this following with Marcella and Nymeria. It's going to be a situation in which I just don't know how Cersei is going to be able to manage the Tyrells, who Marjorie will likely still be in King's Landing, who also I think will die at some point, whether that's by Cersei or some other force, who knows? Could be the Sand Snakes could be responsible for that too. We could see the Sand Snakes execute like a mass assassination on the eve of young Griff taking the city, killing the queen and Marjorie, killing the king and Tommen, killing the sister of the king and Marcella, and possibly trying to kill Cersei, but maybe she gets away. So that to me is a lot of what we're going to be seeing with Tommen and Marcella. Now, the other part of Tommen's rule is going to be interesting is he going to be highly influenced by the High Sparrow, right? Now it almost feels like there's this open connection between the High Sparrow and Tommen. The only protection that Tommen has from the High Sparrow is Cersei, right? All the other people that were, ruling in his stead are gone. And so will that become a factor? In the show, it was interesting because they used the High Sparrow to manipulate kind of a teenage years Tommen. Tommen is very much a kid, right? He's somebody that's complaining about vegetables. He's somebody that likes playing with his cat. He is not anything like the show version of the character. He's not, even grown up into his teenage years. He's still a kid. And so you very easily can manipulate him against Cersei. That could be something that maybe leads to her leaving the city even more, her son turning against her. I just think there isn't a ton to go off of with these characters on what can we expect. Now, I think what we would expect is people fighting over Tommen. Marjorie trying to manipulate him, Cersei trying to manipulate him, the High Sparrow trying to manipulate him. Tommen isn't necessarily going to have much of an actual character himself. And Marcella is almost the same way, whereas Marcella was much more grown up by the end of the show. That's not the case in the book at all. She's still very young, and she's manipulated very easily by the Dornish, for instance, and even Eris Oakheart. So again, I think you have two characters, very easy to be manipulated. We also have this prophecy that Cersei's children are going to die before her. Everything just kind of lines up for their deaths in Winds of Winter. I can't see a situation in which they live and young Griff takes the city. So unfortunately for the young Lannister kids, I think they will die. And I think that will be part of the reason that Cersei may turn to some sort of, drastic action. I don't think it'll be like it is in the show, like I talked about in the High Sparrow video. But it could lead her to trying to do something crazy and maybe, leaving King's Landing to come back later on and be desperate enough to go with somebody like Euron. But let me know what you guys think for the characters of Tommen and Myrcella, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.